Do you find it difficult to have meaningful conversations about God with those you want to disciple? If you feel like this, you're not alone. And there is good news. Discipleship doesn't have to be difficult. The most effective discipleship happens when you simply talk about God in the everyday moments of life. With the D6 Everyday Foundations curriculum, you can simplify discipleship by making these conversations easy. Because of our generational aligned curriculum, all ages, from preschoolers to grandparents and everyone in between, learn from the same scriptures each week. This means you can have those easy conversations around the table, in the car, or anytime, because what you're learning, they're learning too. Discipleship doesn't have to be difficult. Visit d6family.com to learn more and use the link in the description.
Welcome back to the D6 Family Ministry Podcast. We believe that discipleship should not be difficult, so we're here to help you connect the dots between church and home. Together, let's guide each generation, whether related to you or not, to stand confident in their faith. I'm your host, Ron Hunter, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Marianne Howard. Hey, Marianne.
Hey, Ron. So, we were talking earlier about your beautiful, wonderful wife, Miss Pam, who is such a treasure. She is so gifted in so many ways. And I told you off the air. I told you off the air that you married way up.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, she's such a gift. And today we're going to be talking about marriage. And so I just wanted to ask the question, how do you structure your schedule to ensure your ministry demands and your marriage are both thriving?
Oh, man. The key for us has always been we're two very similar personalities, and that helps out a lot. We're both introverts. That may surprise some. We've talked about this off and on at different episodes. And for us, it's togetherness. Our perfect date is watching TV together, doing a movie together. For those who do not know, my wife has dealt with some chronic illness throughout most of her adult life. And so our routines and habits are very different from others. And so for us, being in the same room together, making sure that I'm looking out for the to-do list that she wants me to focus on, helps her. And, I'm not much different than other ministry leaders. Do I bring work home? Yes, I do. But I try my best to start some of my work after she goes to bed or in times where we're each doing our own thing. But it is a balance, and no matter what I do for her, it's never going to be enough for what she does for me. I'll say that. She's such an incredible support, and I love her dearly. As we look at our episode today, we are talking marriage. Marianne set this up so well. And I want to introduce the quote that we're going to share with you today. I know that's not on my scripted role for doing that, but one of my favorite movies is A Few Good Men. And that movie is filled with quotes. It's just the most quotable movie maybe ever. And we all know the most famous line in there. You want the truth? You can't handle the truth. That whole big line.
Yes.
Well, most of you may or may not know that our guest today, Brad Rhoads, before he was in ministry, was an attorney. Mm-hmm. And this next line is going to sound a little bit like you can't handle the truth. Let's listen to Brad as he gives us a little insight on what we're going to be hearing.
You really can never say, I don't have time for my marriage. Because one, if you don't have time for your marriage, you're really not qualified for your job anyway.
This interview is convicting. So yes. Buckle up. So one of the things I want to encourage you to do, listeners, is think about two things: boundaries and balance. Those are the two words I want you to go in thinking about, is how can you set up boundaries and balance between your ministry demands and your marriage. Let's have a listen.
Right now, I'm joined by Brad Rhoads. Brad has been married to his wife, Marilyn, since 1996. They have 5 children, 4 girls and a boy. Brad graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Furman University and played on the varsity tennis team. He practiced as a full-time attorney for over 20 years. Brad and his wife are co-founders of Grace Marriage, and they are the authors of Grace Marriage, How the Gospel and Intentionality Transform Your Relationship. Brad, thanks for coming back.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, we're talking about a topic that's a little bit sensitive probably to a lot of people, and that's how to get unstuck and how those in full-time ministry can actually have a full-time ministry and a flourishing marriage. I think sometimes people, maybe we don't think it, but when it's lived out, it seems like those two things are at odds with each other. So to kind of start us out, based on your work with pastors, how much time is the average pastor working each week?
It varies radically. You've got bivocational pastors that sometimes 60, 70 hours a week. You had them both. You have some pastors that are lead pastors of smaller churches that spend a ton of hours. You have some that don't work that many hours. So it varies. It's really all over the board.
Well, marriage is a good thing. Ministry is a good thing. Mm-hmm. But sometimes those things butt heads. How have you seen ministry interfere with a pastor's marriage?
Well, one, having a good marriage is really a qualification for ministry. Manage your household well. Your qualifications of elder, it's like, really, you should be about the best husband there is, or best spouse there is. So the way it's at odds is, it's when ministry is more important than your wife. And whenever you violate God's order, and it's, I heard one author say, if anything comes ahead of your marriage other than Jesus Christ, your marriage will slowly die. So when you prioritize the needs of the congregation over the needs of your spouse, when you're away from your home while she's putting kids to bed, while you are more responsive to others than to her, over time, isolation and trouble comes.
What would you say to the pastor who says, yeah, I get that, but I'm so busy. I have so much to do. I'm maybe the only one on staff, and somebody has to get this stuff done?
I'd say, good marriage is non-negotiable. It's like my board says, marriage is a hill worth dying on. You really can never say, I don't have time for my marriage. Because one, if you don't have time for your marriage, you're really not qualified for your job anyway. So for us, it's just time blocking. I just say every week, I'm going to spend 5 straight hours with Marilyn on a date, just the two of us. And when you look theologically and everything about marriage, 5 hours toward marriage, having an entire week, it doesn't seem like that big of ask considering the theological and pragmatic implications. I had one pastor that I worked with said the exact same thing. I'm too busy. I've got these demands. I've got funerals. I've got weddings. You don't understand. Well, he bought in. And I got an email from him and said, Brad, thank you. I'm spending a lot of time with my wife, having a blast. No longer am I taking away from my ministry. I'm staying qualified for it. His life was better. His ministry was better. He was more fruitful. He was more vibrant. And I believe now he'll have a long-term fruitful ministry instead of a short-term one.
When people are dealing with that, do you think it's that the church is putting too many demands on the pastor, or is it more that maybe the pastor is believing wrongly that the church is putting those demands and they've kind of developed a workaholic mentality?
It's an excellent question. It's both. One, you have how many forces in a church press the pastor toward his wife? Say, hey, just go spend time with your wife, hang out, enjoy your wife, just chill, just go on a date, eat dinner. No, how many forces in a church push you, come to our senior dinner, come to this. So there are a lot of forces pulling you away from marriage, not a lot of forces pushing you toward marriage. That's why one of the reasons we started Grace Marriage, to create a force to push you toward marriage. But then it's also, we all have a people-pleasing element in it. So people don't like to disappoint people. Yeah. And pastors don't like to disappoint people, and they get a lot of affirmation when they go places and they do things. So the pastor, one, wants to be appreciated and wants to please everybody, but two, you have a lot of pressure there too. And I really think it's, do you want to be liked by all or respected by all? I read that in the book Essentialisms. And if you want to be respected, I really can't do that because I really value my marriage and I'm going to spend time with my wife. That sets an example. That's good shepherding. That's much better shepherding than trying to please everybody by being at everything.
Well, when a job's emotionally demanding like that of a full-time minister, a husband might be spending time with his wife in his physical sense, but he could be completely disconnected emotionally. They may be sitting next to each other on the couch, but he is just completely gone and his mind is somewhere else. Even when a pastor is completely exhausted, how can he avoid that disconnection with his spouse?
Well, one is share the exhaustion with her. I had that very scenario this week. I was just had a lot of things going through my mind. I was stressed. Was exhausted. And I just said, I'm just going to lay it out there for Marilyn. I said, Marilyn, I'm exhausted. I'm stressed. Here's what's going through my mind. And I felt better. We felt closer. It's doing the marriage work and the emotional work of sharing the exhaustion, the why behind the exhaustion. And then your spouse feels close to you, connected to you. And when your spouse knows you're exhausted, you're stressed, he said it triggers this helpmate thing within your wife that makes her want to come help you. But when you're just distant and you're cold and you're disconnected because you're mostly exhausted, she feels there's something wrong with the marriage, and then she feels like you're being rude to her. But if you're honest with her and you share with her all the exhaustion and the why behind the exhaustion, she realizes it's not her, it's not the marriage, it's just you got a lot on you right now, and then it triggers her wanting to love you and help you.
Well, I'm gonna ask you a question. I'm gonna go off script here, but you focus on marriage with your ministry. You also spent time as an athlete in college. How important is the physical fitness aspect of pastor taking care of himself when it actually comes to their marriage, especially when a job is demanding? How important is it for them that they actually take care of their body so that they can hold up through the long haul of this?
It's tremendously important. I mean, it's like Sabbath concept, physical exercise, these things. I mean, to be engaged and to love your congregation well, to love your spouse well. I mean, if you're fatigued and you feel terrible and you're trying to will yourself to do something when you feel like you have no energy for it, there's no way you're going to do it well consistently. And that's one thing I really believe in the Sabbath concept. No work one day a week, just chilling and enjoying it and taking it as a gift from God. Thank you, I get this and I can trust you. Because when I do that, I love Marilyn better. I love my staff better. I love my team better. When I'm going 60, 70 hours a week, full bore, I think it's more of a sign of really my ego than my love for ministry. But when I will trust the Lord, work less, take care of myself, you're not a good lover when you're fatigued. In fact, most moral collapse occurs after a period of spiritual and moral fatigue. I talked to a PhD counselor who said virtually every moral lapse of a pastor is preceded by a period of physical and mental fatigue. So when you don't take care of yourself, not only do you not perform as well, but you also set yourself up for potential disaster.
That's very powerful. And I think sometimes we hear the phrase self-care, and sometimes there's pushback against that because we think that's selfish.
Yeah.
But God does want us to take care of our bodies so we can take care of our ministries and take care of our marriages.
I tell people the most selfless thing you can do is to take care of yourself. Because if you really don't have anything to offer people, well, you're not doing them a favor. So if I'm not taking care of myself and I feel terrible and I'm not engaged with my family and I'm not taking care of myself, that's actually selfish, not selfless.
That's really powerful. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue talking to Brad about this topic.
Are you looking to strengthen your marriage or discover its deeper purpose? Visionary Marriage by Rob and Amy Reno really draws couples closer to each other and to God as you dive into the pages. It's packed with practical advice and biblical insights, and I love how Rob and Amy tackle the real-life challenges that every marriage needs to revisit, like communication, conflict resolution, spiritual growth, all while helping couples understand the why behind their union. With engaging chapters and thought-provoking questions, you'll uncover God's vision for your family and be inspired to build your life around your marriage. Whether you're newly married, seasoned in your relationship, or if you're supporting marriages within your ministry, Visionary Marriage should be part of the wisdom that you offer to yourself or others. To purchase or learn more, visit d6.family/store or click the link in the description below.
We're back, and we're talking with Brad Rhoads about the coexistence of a flourishing marriage and full-time ministry. Now, I know that you've helped some people develop a strategy to set boundaries and invest in their marriages. Can you share some of those boundaries with us?
Yeah, it's basically saying that my family gets this time and nobody else does. So like if I come home from ministry at 5:30, my family gets me till the next morning. I don't share it through text and phone calls and counseling sessions and things with other folks. So setting up that boundaries, I've heard you either have strict boundaries or no boundaries. And frankly, if you're texting people from the congregation 4 or 5 times a night, taking one phone call, you're not going to develop deep relationships with your wife or your kids. I've told many couples it was like just really demanded, I need to meet with you tonight. We both work. I said, look, I can't sacrifice my family for yours. Unless I am living out this enjoying Maryland and flourishing marriage myself, I really don't have anything to impart. So if you want to meet at night, you'll have to find another counselor.
That's good. You mentioned earlier that sometimes the church can demand certain things. If the seniors are having a ministry, or a get together or a dinner, we expect the senior pastor to be there, or maybe the youth is having something. We think they should be there too. What can the church do to ease the burden on pastors and to help them with their marriages and help those marriages thrive?
Well, one is like we talked about earlier. It's to create a church culture that pushes your pastor toward the spouse, not away from your spouse. So it's like one, understanding when they're not at things. 2, encourage them not to come to things. 3, making sure that they're spending time with their spouse and they're having a vibrant marriage that's a good example for the body. Not pressuring them to be at things at the expense of their family. So, and from the pastor's side of things, the pastor has to be bold and kind of set an expectation. Because if you set an expectation, the pastor, you're going to be at all these things, just expect you to be there. But if they know you won't because you're at home with your family and those are your priorities, believe it or not, they'll start leaving you alone. Now, early on when I did this, I got a lot of pushback and frustrated some of the pastors. But once they kind of realized that, hey, I've got 5 kids and a wife, and I'm not going to go eat chicken fingers on a Wednesday night to support our deacons, they quit asking. But actually, it's created more of a culture of that in our church now, and our other pastors do it as well, which I'm proud of them.
Sometimes, let me see how to say this the right way. Sometimes people in our church think there are emergencies that may not be emergencies, and they think the pastor needs to be there. Sometimes there are legitimate emergencies. How can a pastor kind of navigate that with their time when, I'm having dinner with my wife, and kids, but someone in the church suddenly thinks, yes, this is an emergency. You need to be here right now. How can pastors kind of navigate that when someone's pulling on their time but making it seem urgent, whether it is or not?
Well, that's a great question. Well, I kind of call it the pastoral funnel. Like if everything has to go through the lead pastor, every emergency, every death, everything, you've really not created a sustainable existence. That's why Ephesians 4 says, equip the saints for the work of the ministry. The best leaders develop a lot of other leaders around them, so there's not that much required out of them time-wise. People that are maybe very talented but not great leaders, it all comes through them and everything falls back to them. So it's really creating multiple leaders in your church, both laity and staff, so that these emergencies can be parceled out almost like doctors on call. So that you might have one night a week or one night every 2 weeks where if something occurs, you're the guy. But even in a small church, you can find other people and you can explain to your body that, hey, to lead you well, I got to love my kids well. To lead you well, I got to love my wife well. In order to do that, I can't be gone 3-4 nights a week. And I want you to have that existence as well.
Yeah, I really like that. Well, as we close, what advice can you offer to the pastor who feels like his marriage has been put on the back burner, but he doesn't know how to reclaim its importance?
Well, I'd say the same thing to somebody who has not exercised in 3 years and doesn't feel in shape. Start. Go to the gym, and if walking 5 minutes is hard, work 5 minutes, walk 5 minutes, next week walk 7. But immediately start spending time with your spouse. Immediately confess a lack of prioritization, and then every single week start just spending 3 to 5 hours with your wife on a date, talking to her, connecting with her. Now, if it doesn't feel like you're clicking, that's normal. You don't go to the gym for a couple of years and you go, it's going to feel terrible. But you do it consistently over a long period of time, you'll develop health. And if you just say these rhythms, we're going to talk every day, we're going to date every week, I'm going to prioritize you over ministry, and you do that over the long haul, you'll be shocked at the results. But you have to start doing it, because unless you change the way you do something, you will continue to achieve the same result.
Well, this has been extremely practical. I think it's going to be uncomfortable for people when they start, like you just mentioned. There's going to be some soreness and some aches and pains, because this isn't typically how we do things, but this is how we need to do things.
And it'll create a better life. I mean, we work with 216 churches at Grace Marriage. We equip churches with marriage ministries, and our pastors that thrive are the ones that have margin, that have boundaries, that enjoy their spouse, and they're the ones that have the most flourishing, growing ministries.
Well, that's excellent. I think you have given people needed permission to go reclaim and redeem their marriages. Amen. Because it is the most important ministry that people will have.
I agree.
Thank you so much for sharing this and just what you've done with Grace Marriage. Just such an amazing ministry that is so needed right now. So thank you for being here today.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Okay, what's your big takeaways that you and Chad are going to be working on?
Oh my goodness. Well, I really love that he brought to light that in the church world, there's many forces pulling away from marriages. And our takeaway, we listened to this together and dialogued about it. And it's a big takeaway for all of us, especially ministry leaders and volunteers, deacons, elders. I don't know what your church leadership structure is like, but he said it towards the end of the interview. We've got to create a church culture that pushes pastors toward their spouse.
Yes.
That is incredible. Yes, that is what we need to be as church communities. As pastors, are you checking in with your staff members and doing regular check-ins on their marriage? Not just their tasks, not just, in fact, Ron, he's my boss, and he checks in with our team about specific things, and that goes for our marriage too. And so I just want to say thank you for always checking in on my marriage and making sure that I'm prioritizing my family.
Well, it's easy when you have a high capacity team to go, hey, it's time to unplug and reconnect to your family or your spouse, stop working for a little bit. And that's the thing. With ministry, the lines are blurry. Cell phones make the lines blurry today for everybody because we don't know where this device that we hold in our hand, when we're looking at it, what's personal, what's work, and it does overlap a lot. So just unplug. Sometimes put the devices down, put everything else aside. And as Brad has told us, don't make marriage personal. Make it that cohesion that God has intended it to be.
Absolutely. I want to encourage our listeners today, if you're married, take a minute to go stare at your spouse's eyes. Look them in the eye today and just look them in the eye, and you don't necessarily even have to have words. Just look them in the eye. Set a timer for eye contact for 1 minute. Just to start reestablishing connection. I hope you'll join us next week. We're going to hear from Ben Birdsong, and oh my, he is going to bring some understanding and some data that we all need to hear about Gen Z and Gen Alpha so we can better understand how to minister to those two generations. Thank you so much for listening. To learn more, visit d6family.com. We look forward to seeing you next week.